A humanoid is a creature with a human shape. These creatures can range in size and features, but that doesn't change the fact that they can be terrifying, as today's video will show. A huge thank you to the writers, whose links can be found in the description, for allowing me to share their stories with all of you. Remember, you can send in your own story to rylhstories@gmail.com. If you enjoy the video, please be sure to like and comment. Subscribing if you're new is also very much appreciated. Enjoy the video, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. I don't drive at night anymore. At least I don't drive anywhere that isn't very well illuminated. I know that sounds silly. Trust me when I say that my friends tease me to no end about it. They're the types that love going for late night cruises out around the outskirts of town, and to go stargazing. Both activities that I enjoyed too once. That wasn't until that one night. After that, I couldn't bring myself out of the light ever again. It was about a year ago in late July. I was living in a small town at the time, in northern Alberta. Staying there to get the most out of the cheap community college and low rent. I had just finished my finals, and was looking forward to visiting family out west for my week-long vacation. It wasn't exactly a short trip, a total of 4 hours at least just to even get to the next town over. To get to where my parents were was an additional 6 hours of travel. Driving through Alberta isn't exactly exciting either, not unless you enjoy wide open spaces and a lot of empty fields, at least. It was about 4 AM when I got into my car. The bright idea to leave early that I had the previous night was now leaving me blurry-eyed and full of regret. I headed over to the closest gas station and stocked up on the usual road trip supplies. Energy drinks, chips, pretty much anything that looked good at the time. The coffee I had brought with me was starting to kick in, and I began to look forward to at least the initial first few hours of the trip. That was typically how it was with long car rides for me. The first few hours were great and relaxing, with the rest of the trip just slowly getting worse as I got those fun cramps of stiffness in the body from sitting for so long. Before heading out of the city, I checked my phone, queuing up my playlist of music that would be keeping me company, and double-checking my route out of the city on Google Maps. Crap. A red bar sat halfway between me and where I was heading. Construction ahead. Expected delay 45 minutes. Great. That was just my luck that the main road itself was getting work done, but there wasn't anything I could really do about that. Finally pulling out of the gas station, I headed out, starting my long journey. The music pulsed through my speakers, as the light pollution of the city slowly faded behind me, and the night sky grew even brighter. It was a full moon out tonight, and one that complemented a sea of stars quite nicely too. That helped raise my mood a bit, and soon I got lost in thought as I cruised down that dark road. After about an hour of driving down the open highway, the sky seemed to quickly darken, the moon becoming obscured and the illuminated plains around me fading away into an inky black. The only thing that was visible now outside of my headlights were different twinkling lights off on the horizon, and the city lights far behind still in my rearview mirror. The lights ahead pulsed between orange and reds, with the occasional flash of a vehicle's headlights. That had to have been construction, I figured. It was another joy of driving out on these flat areas. You were able to see practically a full hour ahead of you in advance, and just really take in all excitement. At night, without the moon's glow, it was a much different feeling than boring though. It kind of felt like you were driving through space itself, a massive black expanse all around you, with only the different bits of light off in the distance showing any real signs of life. Almost as though the night sky itself had dripped down and enveloped the ground below. I cursed and shielded my eyes as someone passed me with a set of far too bright to be legal headlights. Night vision being lost immediately. By the time I could actually see again, thankfully having not flown off the road, everything that wasn't in my headlights was just pitch black now. The edges of my car's headlight beams didn't seem to extend very far out either. Because of this, I almost missed a pair of cats that were off the side of the road, hazard lights going on and off to try and warn me in advance. I slowed my vehicle to try and get a better look, in case they needed any help. But as I passed by, I didn't see anyone in the vehicles themselves. Neither car appeared to be damaged either. Weird. Maybe the owners had car problems and had hitched a ride back to town until a tow truck could come and retrieve the vehicles. I couldn't really give much better of a guess than that, so I continued on, not wanting to rubberneck any more than I already had. The darkness at this point had become rather oppressive. I noticed that outside of my beam of light, it was now just a solid black wall, like it just cut off immediately with no glow or anything. I had to slow my speed to half just to be safe, while trying my best to stay on the road. I must have completely forgotten about the construction zone, for when an orange pylon appeared out of the darkness, I hit the brakes. I must have missed the warning signs due to this weird blackout, but this had to have been the start of the construction zone. With due diligence, I crawled through the area, trying to catch sight of any workers or really any signs of life. That's when I realized that there had been some kind of life around here. I had already seen their lights on farther back down the road, but now as I drove through, there wasn't a single piece of equipment that seemed to be turned on in any way. Excavators sat abandoned, doors wide open without an operator inside. Any floodlights had been knocked over, or otherwise turned off in some other manner. However, things quickly went south from there. About halfway through was when I saw something. A prone body lying face down on the side of the road. Only half of the person was visible from my car. I stopped the vehicle, wondering what he was doing at first, as it looked like he had his ear to the ground. Eventually, I realized that he must have been unconscious, so I put the car in park, turning on my phone's flashlights and the car interior lights, before getting out to add as much extra light as I could to the area. The moment I stepped out of the car, I could feel a very stark difference in the air. It was supposed to be the middle of the summer, yet I could almost see my breath. It was freezing out here for some reason. "Hey buddy, are you okay?" I called out nervously, voice holding an echo to it that had no right to be there. I shined my flashlight over him as I got closer, before quickly stumbling back. I practically sprinted back to my car, throwing myself inside and slamming the door behind me. Panicking to find the lock button, my fingers hit it, and I tried to stop myself from hyperventilating. The lower half of that man's body had been eaten. Past his stomach was nothing more than bits of gore and viscera that had been strewn out across the road. It looked like something had just ripped into him and left the rest to rot. I pulled out my phone and tried to call 911, but I had no bars. I must have been too far out to get any signal. It wasn't like I could do anything to help the poor man from here, so I pulled the car out of park and continued out of the construction site. I spotted a few more bodies in varying condition as I tried to make my way out. That was when I saw it. Just as I turned a corner, my headlights illuminated something that was hunched over another construction worker. It almost looked like a person, but it was far too dark. It was incredibly thin, spine jutting out from its back as it initially faced away. When it turned in response to the light, it covered its malformed face with a massive hand that ended in a sharp, ragged claw. Pinprick white eyes glaring at me from the shadows of its hand, as it let out a shriek and bounded off into the darkness. At that point, I slammed my foot down on the gas and floored it out of there, having to swerve once or twice to avoid the abandoned equipment. Eventually, I rocketed out of the site, going far too fast, but unable to slow down. In my rearview mirror, I could see them, a collection of white eyes that trailed along behind me in the distance. They didn't make any sound, but I could tell they were getting closer little by little. I must have had at least some luck tonight, as when I made my way over the next hill, I could see off in the distance a gas station that was well lit, a beacon of light in this sea of darkness that surrounded me. I managed to get to it in only a few minutes, my tires screeching across the pavement as I came to a halt directly under the gas area. The darkness was like a wall all around it, but I had a clear path to get inside of the building. Taking a deep breath, I escaped my vehicle and sprinted up to the glass door. When I got to it, the attendant inside was already unlocking it and pressing a button on the side to power it on, letting it open enough to get me in before he closed it again, with the lock in place. "Are you alright?" He asked me as I stumbled away from the door, trying to put distance between me and the numerous windows that covered the front wall of the station. I felt vulnerable. There in that little store, the panes of glass being the only thing between us and all that darkness outside, just waiting for the lights to go out. I started to try and explain to him what I had seen. When outside, the bulbs began to blow one by one around the top of the gas station, with the darkness encroaching closer and closer until it was pressed up against the windows. The light that was inside didn't seem to phase it at all now. Almost as soon as it had reached the glass, I could see them again, small sets of white eyes dipping in and out of the darkness. "What is going on?" The attendant cried out in a panic as he too backed away from the glass. That was when we saw the first crack appear on the window, the tip of a clawed hand pressing into the glass as it singed underneath the bits of light that reached. "I don't know, just help me barricade this," I shouted back to him before shoving the shelves towards the front of the store. The glass held long enough for us to get a sort of half wall set up, but I knew it wouldn't hold them back forever. Turning to him, I asked, "Is there a security room or somewhere else we can hide in here?" He nodded, saying, "In the back room. It's small, but it should fit us both." We got into the security room and shut the door, sliding the heavy lock into place before settling in. The room was small but well illuminated, a row of 6 TV screens showing different camera angles from all around the building. 4 of them were completely blacked out, with only 2 left that were inside the store itself. One was positioned in the main lobby, and the second was pointed just outside our door. Only a few minutes after we had entered the security room did the front windows shatter. We only got to see a couple of seconds, but we watched the shelves get pushed aside and the inside go completely black. Now all of the cameras were dark, and when the single bulb above us started to flicker, I turned on my phone's flashlight just in case. Luckily, the power didn't go out in the room at least. The door being sealed along the bottom as well, so there wasn't any cracks for whatever this thing was to filter in through. We sat there in silence for a time, neither of us brave enough to break it in fear of attracting unwanted attention. That silence broke at the first sound of scratching, which eventually led to a chorus of low whispers just outside of our door. They sounded just like normal people, and if it wasn't for what I had already seen, I might have thought that we were being rescued. But their voices were too low, and underneath their pleas for us to come out, I could get that sense of danger just on the edges of it. Like if we didn't comply, there would be consequences. I don't know how long we were forced to sit there and listen to the scratching and whispers. The TV monitors would come on though, one by one, as the darkness seemed to recede. The sky a pool of red and orange that signaled sunrise. We waited until the sun was well above the horizon before opening the door slowly and taking our first steps outside. The store was trashed, glass everywhere, along with what looked like hundreds of footprints that had trampled across the merchandise. My car appeared untouched, and I got it running again after the police arrived to aid the attendant. I still don't know what I saw that night. I don't think I ever will, but I think that's for the best, as there are some things that should probably stay in the darkness. When I was younger, I was never the type to be scared over scary things. Sure, I'd get spooked over a few stories, like getting kidnapped and getting held hostage, or being asleep while a fire has started and the flames slowly make its way to your room and burn you alive, killing you slowly while you're in the middle of a slumber. But a stupid story about a hairy 8-foot tall creature living in the forest called Bigfoot. Stupid if you ask me. This all has changed, however. I now believe we are walking on a planet that has horrifying monsters roaming around, waiting for us to run into them and shred us apart. I now know we aren't safe. It all started last year in a small town in Nebraska. I was visiting my best friend Abe. I lived in California, so we try to take turns and visit each other as much as we can. We met online 5 years ago and have been best friends ever since. Abe is only 1 year older than me. He's 21, when I just recently turned 20. He's a little bit on the cuckoo side with his weird alien research and Slenderman stories. "Hey Ben," he shouted out the window in his car while picking me up from the airport. "Hey Abe," I shouted back with a huge grin on my face. He got out of the car and we did our bro handshake. Cringe, I know. I hopped in the front seat and we drove for 45 minutes, catching up on life and bragging about who's better at what. We finally arrived at his house, which to be honest really creeped me out. Behind his house was a huge darkened forest. He only had 2 neighbors, and one was an old lady that stares out the window in her wheelchair, and the other neighbor was a drunk that would hit his girlfriend, according to Abe anyways. As the day quickly fell into night, Abe and I played video games until we eventually got bored. "Hey," Abe quietly said with a nervous but excited look in his eyes. "Would you maybe want to go find this creature everyone in town is supposedly scared of?" I looked at him with a raised eyebrow and laughed. "Dude, you really believe that crap too? Come on. You know there's no such thing as monsters or little creepy crawlies lurking around." He looked at me with a serious look in his face, and said in his most serious tone, "This thing is real, Ben, and I will find it and discover it." I looked at him, shocked and a little concerned for my friend. The room suddenly grew quiet for a few minutes, until he finally broke the silence and asked, "Well, are you coming or not?" He got up, getting a flashlight, and putting it in his backpack. "What? Are you insane, dude? It's late. Why do you want to go in the middle of the forest at 2 a.m. in the cold for a stupid tale?" As he was tying his shoes, he looked up at me, annoyed. "I mean, you can stay here. I'm still going. I was just offering." I jumped out of the chair and raised a finger up in his face. "Wait, is that what you do at 2 a.m.? Is this why you disappear until 10 a.m. in the morning? Dude, are you insane?" He started walking out his door, and I sighed quickly, throwing my shoes on, chasing after him. Catching up and slightly out of breath, I asked him what this creature was that had the town so intrigued. He told me to keep my voice down, turning on his flashlight, looking around and hearing for any footsteps or a twig breaking softly. He whispers again in the lowest voice possible. "Legend has it this creature can give you a wish if you follow 2 simple rules." "And what are these rules?" I say in a loud voice, forgetting to whisper back. "Will you be quiet?" He said in an angry voice, but still quiet as a mouse. "You'll scare it off." I rolled my eyes and asked the same question but with a lower voice. "One of the rules is to never mock it," called out with a sarcastic tone. "Or what? What's it going to do? Rip my eyes out?" I laughed at my own joke, until Abe grabbed me by the collar of my shirt. "Listen, Ben, you can laugh at this all you want, but believe me, you won't be laughing when it's ripping your throat out." "Okay, man, I'm sorry. Jeez. No, but seriously, what would it do? And what does it even look like?" He continued with a calmer tone. "This is no joke. This is not something to take advantage of. This is real, man, and I'm going to get proof. This thing, demon or angel, I don't even know, will give you a wish, as long as you respect its wishes." He rolled his eyes and looked at me. Before I got rudely interrupted, the second rule is to never, ever look at it. If you disobey its rules, according to theorists, it will flip your skin inside out, rip your heart out and eat it whole, making it stronger. and eating your brains making it smarter. Disgusted and a bit shaken up, I gathered myself together and asked, "Well, what does this thing look like?" "It's tall, man. Skinny to the point you can see its ribs. Its teeth are long and sharp, ready to dig into your skin. It can shapeshift into other people, tricking its victim. But if you do as it's asked, it will reward you." And who would be crazy enough to... As I was about to finish my sentence, a loud screeching noise interrupted me and filled the nighttime air. "Quick, hide behind the tree. Be quiet and don't make any noises. Make sure it doesn't notice you staring at it." Abe yanking my arm and leading us to a tree that was big enough to hide us. "Don't be stupid," I whispered to him. "It's probably an animal being killed." "Does that sound like any animal to you?" Feeling nervous myself, I nervously gulped, knowing that he's right, and that it did indeed sound nothing like any animal I've ever heard. A few moments later, we heard the sounds of bones breaking and low growls. As soon as I heard those noises, my heart was beating out of my chest, and my face turned pale. "What is this? It can't be," I told myself in my head. "It's probably just an animal that's hurt." I whispered to Abe, trying to calm us down. "That's no animal," he whispered back. "It must have hurt us, because it screamed at the top of its lungs, looking around frantically like a mother losing her child in a grocery store. It sniffed the air and got closer to us. Freaking out, our breathing got even louder. I backed up, stepping on a twig, making its head jerk towards our direction. It screeched so loud that it echoed through the forest, making my ears hurt to the point I screamed myself. Let me tell you, as soon as I saw this thing, the color on my face drained immediately. This thing was at least 7 foot. It had long dark hair, covering most of its face, and its mouth stretched open so wide, exposing its sharp teeth sticking out. Its claws. We ran through the forest, running into branches and feeling the cold breeze burning our cheeks and eyes. The sound of screeches, and the sound of its claws tearing up everything that got in its way as it's chasing us. After what felt like hours of running, knees shaking, ready to throw up, we ran out of the forest and continued running until we reached Abe's back door, and locked every window and door in the house, trying to catch our breaths. I let out a, "What was that?" Abe drank out of his water bottle and finally spoke with a terrified tone in his voice. "I never should have done this. It knows we know now. It'll keep stalking us until it kills us." "What do you mean, man? We ran away from it. We're safe now." "No, we aren't. We looked at it and we broke its rule. We were supposed to close our eyes and call out to it. We didn't do that." I was about to say something, until I heard a loud scratch on the window. Our heads quickly turned to the noise, and to my horror, there it was, looking at us, with an evil grin on its face.
"Let me in,"
it said with a deep, unnatural voice. "No way!" Abe screamed at the top of his lungs. "Go away! Leave us alone!" The creature banged on the door, screaming to let it in, and telling us what it would do to us if we didn't. We ran to Abe's room, locking the door and putting his dresser in front of it. Freaking out, asking each other what we should do, we were interrupted by a loud bang in the living room, which was only down the hall from Abe's room. Panicked, we ran into his closet, and were as quiet as we could be. The door started banging and the creature screamed,
"Let me in."
After an hour of banging and loud screaming, the sun slowly started to come up, and everything was quiet again. After 20 minutes of silence and the sun shining through Abe's room, we slowly stepped out of the closet and pushed the drawer out of the way, and unlocked his door. We walked into the living room, with glass shattered everywhere, and an odor that nearly made me vomit. We walked in the kitchen and saw a dead deer. I think it was a deer. Its skin was flipped inside out and its eyes were out of its sockets. On the wall, covered in blood, it said, 120319. None of that made sense to us, until recently. After that happened, I flew back to California, pleading Abe to come with me since it wasn't safe. He kindly refused, since it was his hometown and he didn't want to leave it. One night though, on December 2nd of 2019, Abe went missing. Throughout that week, he was acting weird and distant. I figured he was just trying to get back on his feet after all that stuff had happened, but I was so wrong. Day by day, his messages would get shorter and shorter, until he officially stopped talking to me altogether. He didn't answer my calls, or my texts. I figured he needed some time to himself, until I found out what really happened the next day. I know what happened to my best friend. That thing killed him, and now it's after me. That writing on the wall, 120319, adds up now. When I heard a loud crash coming from the kitchen, I ran to my door and quietly locked it. Holding the baseball bat in my hand, I think it knows I know it's here though. I hear the sound of bones cracking and loud thumps getting closer and closer. The biggest question I have is how did it know where to find me? Okay, I don't even know where to begin with this. I'm not normally a person to freak out about things. In fact, I'm a very skeptical person when it comes to weird things happening. I'm sure they happen, just not around me, if that makes sense. So this event has me a little freaked out. I'm not even sure why I'm posting this. It took me a few days to even decide if I should. I'm almost certain I imagined it all. Let me start at the beginning and I'll try not to ramble. Thursday night, my wife and I went out for a special Valentine's dinner event for wine club members at a local winery. A 5-course meal with a glass of wine with each course. It wasn't a full glass of wine, more like a sample, the kind you get when you go for wine tasting. My wife was disappointed in that. She thought we'd get a full glass. Naturally, I suggested we buy a bottle at the bar, since the samples weren't going to be enough for us for each course of the dinner. Wait, I'm starting to wander. Something happened before we even left that I almost left out. Before we left, I had to take the dogs out for a quick bathroom break. We've got 3 dogs. Teddy the Boston Terrier, Georgia the Bulldog. American, not English. And Honey the Greyhound. They always go out in the same order. Boston, then the Greyhound, then the Bulldog. We use a leash when the weather is bad, or when the yard is yucky, as my wife puts it. That can be either muddy from rain, muddy from melting snow, or in the case of our current weather, covered in ice. So I take Teddy out, he does his business, and we go back in. Next I take Honey out. She always likes to wander the yard a bit in the evenings, before getting her business done. Walk here and there, then finish. Only last night she was distracted by something. I don't know what it was, but she kept staring off beyond our chain link fencing, into the field behind our house. That's the thing with sight hounds. They see things that you can't. I'm looking where she's looking, asking her, "Honey, what are you looking at?" And eventually pleading for her to please just pee so we can go back in. That whole time she's looking past the fence. Even when her body isn't facing it, she's turning her head to look. To top it off, we were walking on ice. We had freezing rain a couple nights ago. And you know how tree limbs get covered in ice when you get freezing rain? Well, the next day it snowed, and with the snow it was just warm enough that the ice fell off the trees. Then it refroze overnight. So we had a layer of ice, layer of snow, and another layer of ice. Except the top layer was more like ice cubes. Honey doesn't like walking on this ice stuff, and neither do I. I've got boots on, so it's not too bad. I feel the ice under my boots as they crunch the cubes up. But I suspect for Honey it's like walking on a bunch of Legos that someone left out on the floor. So here I am, walking a dog across Lego-like ice, trying to get her to pee while she is more interested in staring over at that fence. Eventually, she goes to the bathroom and we go back in. The entire time we're walking back to the door, she's looking back behind her. But the weirdest part was yet to come. I got Georgia out and back in quick as you please. She wasn't messing around. And she didn't get distracted either, thankfully. We needed to get going if we were going to make it to that dinner on time. And away we go for our dinner. As I said, it was a 5-course meal with wine, and we bought a bottle. So between us we had a bottle and a half, and we had some really good food. We left there quite full and satisfied, but not even really buzzed. I mentioned to my wife that we could have stayed a little longer, and maybe bought a glass or two of wine from the bar, as it was still open. She said no, she was full and we needed to get home. We'd been gone for a few hours and it was time for the dogs to go out again. So we get back home and go through the routine again. Well, almost. Teddy out, done, in. Georgia went out second this time. She was having a cow, barking like crazy. That's her sign that she has to go pee real bad. So she got to go second. Only I get her out there and she just screws around a bit. Finally, after what seemed like forever, she pees and I get her back in. And now it's Honey's turn. All of our dogs have developed a regimen, and this time of night is when Honey goes number 2. We get outside and she's walking around looking for that perfect stop. 95% of the time she goes right in the corner of the yard, and tonight is no exception. She's going around in a circle in the corner. I hear it just as she squats. The unmistakable sound of ice crunching underfoot. The same sound I hear when I walk across the ice cubes in the backyard. I freeze and jerk my head to look around. It's times like this I wish I had sighthound eyes, because I can't see anything in the dark behind our fence. The sound was only there for a couple of seconds, like a couple steps or something. I quickly look back to see if Honey is done taking that crap, because I really don't want to be out there right now. She is finishing up, and as soon as she's done, I'm moving her right back up to the door and back inside. I glance over my shoulder every few seconds, as we walk back to the door. Yeah, I was a little freaked out. I still am when I think back to it. I just can't decide if it was the alcohol or if there really was something in the field. Or worse, just beyond our fence. I can't stop thinking about it, so I decided to share the story and maybe that will get it out of my head. And if anything else weird happens, I'm going to start a log or make notes on the calendar.